Was China the real winner of the US Iran deal? What if the agreement being celebrated as an American diplomatic victory is actually the moment China took another major step forward on the global chessboard of power? I spent the entire morning going back through every detail of the US-Iran agreement, the deal that just pulled the Middle East back from the brink of a full-scale war. And the more I read, the more I felt that the story being told by Western media might only be the tip of the iceberg. The headlines are everywhere: peace preserved, diplomacy wins, a victory for Washington. On the surface, it all sounds reasonable. The missiles have stopped flying. Tensions between Tehran and Tel Aviv have cooled. Millions of people across the region can finally go to sleep without wondering whether a missile might come crashing through their ceiling. But then a report published on June 17 raised a completely different question. If America truly won, why do the biggest beneficiaries seem to be sitting in Beijing and Moscow? That's the question worth thinking about. Because if we look closely at what happened, we find an extraordinary paradox. Washington invested enormous diplomatic resources, endured criticism at home for negotiating with Tehran, and dispatched diplomats around the world to calm the crisis. Yet, in the end, America's two biggest geopolitical rivals appear to be the ones walking away with the trophy. How could that happen? The answer didn't emerge overnight. It is the result of years of quiet shifts in global power that many people simply failed to notice. According to analysts cited in the report, China provided Iran with a very particular form of support during the build-up to the crisis. No troops, no warships, no dramatic public declarations. It was the kind of support that operates quietly, but effectively. Beijing offered diplomatic cover at the United Nations. It continued purchasing Iranian oil while Iran's economy struggled under sanctions. Those financial lifelines helped prevent Tehran from collapsing under mounting pressure. Then, at the decisive moment, when Iran had to choose between further escalation and accepting the off-ramp offered by Washington, Beijing reportedly sent a very clear message. Take the deal. Cool things down. Don't burn the entire region over this crisis. And Iran listened. Pause for a moment and think about that. The agreement now being called an American victory may have happened, at least in part, because China wanted it to happen. That is not a minor detail. It is a major geopolitical signal. But to understand why Beijing acted this way, we need to go back in time. In 2021, China and Iran signed a 25-year strategic cooperation agreement. The numbers being discussed were staggering, roughly $400 billion in Chinese investments across Iranian infrastructure, energy, telecommunications, and finance. In return, China secured long-term access to discounted Iranian oil and gained a strategic foothold beside the Persian Gulf, the route through which roughly 1/3 of the world's seaborne oil passes. At that very moment, what was Washington focused on? America was talking about withdrawing from Afghanistan. America was talking about its pivot to Asia. America was talking about competing with China somewhere else. The Middle East was supposed to be a chapter that was ending. But history rarely follows anyone's plans. Then came 2022. Russia launched its military operation in Ukraine, and suddenly Moscow needed more partners. Iran stepped in. Tehran supplied Russia with large numbers of Shahed drones, the inexpensive but highly effective UAVs that the world has been watching for years. In return, relations between Russia and Iran deepened faster than ever before. Discussions involving air defense technology, aircraft, and even nuclear expertise increasingly appeared in analysts' reports. Meanwhile, Washington continued to believe that sanctions would eventually force Tehran to yield. That may have been the biggest miscalculation of all. Sanctions only work when the targeted country is truly isolated. But Iran was no longer isolated. China kept buying oil. Russia remained willing to cooperate. Other commercial doors stayed open. As a result, sanctions gradually lost much of their intended impact. They still existed on paper. They still imposed costs. But they no longer possessed enough leverage to bring Tehran to its knees. This was something numerous experts had been warning about for years. Yet those warnings largely went unheard. Then came this spring. Airstrikes, retaliation, threats. The entire Middle East held its breath. And suddenly, the biggest question emerged. Why did Iran agree to the deal? Why did a country that had spent years building proxy networks, escalating tensions, and projecting defiance toward Washington suddenly choose de-escalation? The answer may be simpler than many people think. Because someone Iran trusted advised them to do so. According to multiple reports, The final days of negotiations involved back-channel communications between Beijing and Tehran. Analysts believe China sent a strong recommendation. Accept the American deal. Do not turn this crisis into a regional war. That revelation exposes something extremely important. For decades, Iran has often been portrayed as an irrational actor, driven primarily by ideology and resistant to ordinary incentives. But what just happened suggests the exact opposite. Iran behaved like a highly rational state. It evaluated its interests. It listened to its most important strategic partner. It chose the option that best protected its long-term position. And perhaps that is even more concerning, because a patient, well-funded Iran operating in close coordination with China and Russia presents an entirely new challenge for the United States. But the story gets even bigger. Buried inside the report is a detail that may be the key to understanding the entire picture. It's called M-Bridge. Most people have never heard of it, but there's a good chance we're going to hear much more about it in the years ahead. M-Bridge is a cross-border digital payment platform backed by the central banks of China, Hong Kong, Thailand, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Its mission is remarkably simple. Allow countries to conduct transactions without relying on the US dollar or the SWIFT system dominated by Washington. Think about that. A new financial infrastructure, a new pathway, another option beyond the dollar. According to the report, M-Bridge could offer transaction costs at roughly half the fees charged by SWIFT. For countries engaged in large-scale international trade, that's an incredibly attractive proposition. And what makes this development even more remarkable are the names involved. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, not Iran, not Russia. These are some of America's oldest and most important partners in the Middle East. Does this mean they are abandoning Washington? No, but it does indicate something else. They are opening another door. They are hedging their risks. They do not want to depend entirely on a single option. Because after watching what happened to Russia in 2022, many countries began asking themselves a difficult question. If the global financial system can be used as a tool against Moscow, could it someday be used against us? That question is being quietly discussed in more capitals than many people realize. And in that environment, what does China need most? Peace, stability, predictability. A major war in the Middle East would send oil prices soaring, disrupt global commerce, and push investors back toward the US dollar as a safe haven. War would strengthen the dollar. That is not what Beijing wants. By contrast, a stable region creates ideal conditions for platforms like M-Bridge to gradually gain traction. That is precisely why China wanted Iran to accept the deal. No shots fired. No troops deployed. No need to play the hero. Yet still capable of shaping the outcome. This is soft power operating at the highest geopolitical level. And if we step back and look at the bigger picture, this may be the most important point of all. America did not lose the negotiation. The war was prevented. That is a genuine achievement. But strategically, Washington may be paying a price that it has not fully recognized yet. China has gained recognition as a power broker in the Middle East. Iran has secured greater breathing room. Russia continues to preserve its influence. America's allies are exploring new financial alternatives. And for the first time in years, the world may be seeing the early outlines of an international order in which the United States is no longer the only game in town. Does that mean the US dollar is about to collapse? No, probably not next year. Perhaps not even this decade. But history's biggest transformations rarely arrive with explosions. They arrive through quiet shifts that accumulate over time. 50 years from now, historians may look back on this week and ask an important question. Was this the moment America saved the Middle East from another devastating war? Or was it the moment the world began to realize that global power was slowly shifting eastward? Nobody knows for certain. But one thing seems increasingly clear. The geopolitical winds are changing. And this time, they appear to be blowing toward Beijing.